August 1930. A Norwegian research ship was conducting research on the remote White Island. Scientists studying this island saw something dark half sticking out of the snow. Approaching closer, they saw a small boat, on which they noticed a hook with an imprint, on which was written, Andrée Polar Expedition 1897. A diary with sticky pages was lying around. Looking around more closely, they saw something terrible. It was a frozen human body that had been propped up against the rocks. The boots on feet were partially covered with snow. The arms and torso were only bone. The head was missing. And the clothes are torn and the rags are scattered around. Scientists thought that the body was most likely mauled by bears. They clumsily opened the flaps of the jacket that was still on the body, and saw a large monogram. They immediately understood whose body it was. It was Salomon August André, a Swedish who, on July 11, 1897, with 2 companions, took off in a hot air balloon to cross the North Pole, but then they mysteriously disappeared. Welcome to the channel of interesting documentaries, where today I will tell you about Andrée's incredible expedition. If you want more similar videos, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And now have a good time. The second half of the 19th century is also called the Age of Arctic Exploration. The dangerous regions of the Arctic fueled people's imaginations. They took this land as a challenge that only real men could overcome. Salomon August André, an engineer at the Stockholm Patent Office, was one such man. Being hot air balloon enthusiast, he wowed everyone at the 1895 gathering of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences with his polar air balloon idea. André attracted a lot of media attention, as well as investor attention. André himself purchased his first hot air balloon in 1893, and subsequently made 9 trips with it, during which they traveled a total distance of only 1,000 miles. The Royal Swedish Academy approved funding for Andrée's expedition and allocated 130,000 kroner in support. In today's money, it is about $1 million. Of them, 36,000 kroner was allocated for the purchase of the balloon. With this funding, the Andrée project was hurriedly launched, unofficially led by King Oscar II, who personally contributed 30,000 kroner. Closely watched by the local and international media, he entered into negotiations with a well-known French balloon manufacturer. He ordered a varnished 3-layered silk balloon with a diameter of just over 20 meters. In 1896, the first attempt was planned. There were many volunteers who wanted to join Andrée's expedition. He chose Nils Gustav, an experienced Arctic meteorologist, and Nils Strindberg, a student who had done original research in physics and chemistry. The main scientific goal of the expedition was mapping the area using aerial photography. It was a team with a lot of useful scientific and technical skills, but almost no ability to survive in extreme conditions. André believed they would be lucky if the wind blew more or less in the direction he wanted. He just needs to fine-tune his directional tow ropes to make them succeed. And also the balloon should be sealed tightly enough to stay in the air for 30 days. However, during the 1896 test, the wind shattered Andrée's optimism. The wind was blowing steadily in the opposite direction from the north, right into the balloon hangar on Danes Island. So it was decided to end the expedition and release the hydrogen from the balloon and return home. Returning to Dane Island in the summer of 1897, the expedition was happy that the balloon hangar built a year earlier was able to withstand the winter storms perfectly. The winds were also more favorable. André strengthened his leadership position by replacing his older and critical companion Gustav with the more enthusiastic Knut Frænkel. On the 11th of July, the top of the wooden hangar was dismantled. 3 explorers climbed into the already heavy bag. Then André dictated one last-minute telegram to King Oscar of Sweden, and another to the media. The support team on the ground cut the last ropes holding the balloon. and the balloon began moving out low over the water. It was pulled so far down by the friction of the several 100-meter-long drag ropes, until finally the bag ended up in the water. Friction also twisted the ropes, loosening them from their bolted holders. A significant part of the ropes were broken, and even 530 kilograms of rope were lost, and 3 explorers simultaneously threw 210 kilograms of sand, so that the basket could rise from the water. 740 kilograms were lost in the first minutes, not even far from the launch site. A balloon from a supposedly manned aircraft turned into a simple, hydrogen balloon with several ropes hanging from it. The balloon was only at the mercy of the wind. His crew no longer had the ability to direct him to any specific target, and they had too little ballast for stability. The balloon rose to a height of 700 meters, where due to the lower air pressure, the hydrogen left the balloon even faster. This balloon had 2 means of communication with the outside world: buoys and pigeons. The buoys, steel cylinders encased in cork, were intended to be dropped from the balloon into the water or onto the ISIL for people to find. Only 2 cylinder messages were found in total. One was sent by Andrée on July 11th, a few hours after takeoff, and it said, "Our trip is going well so far. We are flying at about 250 meters. Heading north, the weather is wonderful." The second was dropped an hour later when they were at 600 meters. Andrée launched at least 4 pigeons, but only one of them was found by the Norwegian steamer. His report is dated July 13th and indicates the direction of travel. All 3 of these reports did not even mention the crash during takeoff, or about an increasingly desperate situation. But Andrée described fully in his main diary. The balloon was unbalanced, flying too high and losing hydrogen faster as a result. And finally, ice was encountered more than once. The balloon got soaked and got heavy from the rain. Free flight lasted 10 hours and 29 minutes, followed by another 41 hours of bumpy flight with frequent ground contact, until the inevitable final crash. The balloon traveled for a total of 2 days and 3.5 hours, during which time none of the 3 men slept. The final landing appeared to be gentle. Neither the men nor the homing pigeons in their wicker cages were harmed, and none of the equipment was damaged, not even the delicate optical instruments and 2 cameras. They spent about a week at the accident site. They were picking things up and making decisions about what and how much to carry and where to go. The balloon contained rescue equipment, weapons, snowshoes, sleds, a tent, and a small collapsible boat. The idea of traveling to the far North Pole was abandoned. There were 2 options to choose from: Stuen Island in Svalbard and Cape Flora in Franz Josef Land. From the maps they had, it was determined that the distance to each was about the same. They decided to go to Cape Flora. The balloon carried a lot of food, but everything was more suited to a balloon trip than a walking tour. Andrée reasoned that they would rather throw the excess food on the road than take too little and have to spend the winter in the Arctic desert. As they left the crash site, they took most of the remaining food with them, along with other essentials such as weapons, a tent, ammunition, and cooking utensils. Because of this, each sled weighed more than 200 kilograms. This was not practical as the weight would break their sledges and wear the men out. But they would fix the sled and move on. But in the end, they decided to leave behind large amounts of food and unnecessary equipment. The load of the sled decreased to 130 kilograms. But now they had to hunt for their own food. They shot and ate seals, walruses, and polar bears throughout the trek. Heading southeast, they soon found that their struggle with the ice and 4-meter-high ice accumulations was hardly bringing them any closer to their goal. The ice drifted in the opposite direction, carrying them back. On August 4th, after much discussion, they decided to target Svalbard Island in the southwest, hoping, after 6 or 7 weeks, to reach the island. The terrain in this direction was very difficult. Sometimes it was necessary to crawl on all fours, But sometimes open water appeared, and their little boat served them well. At first they moved forward, and things went well. But then the wind shifted and they were pushed back again, away from Svalbard. The wind fluctuated between southwest and northwest for the next few weeks. They tried in vain to overcome this by turning further and further west, but it was becoming clear that Svalbard was becoming inaccessible to them. On September 12th, the explorers accepted the reality that they would have to spend the winter on the ice and stopped on the giant pole, letting the ice take them where it wanted. They hastily built a house. The walls were made of water-reinforced snow. Observing the speed and direction of their drift, Andrée hoped that they would drift far enough to the south, and that they would be able to feed themselves fully on the animals they hunted. However, on October 2nd, their ice floor began to break right under their ice house, and they were forced to settle on the island itself. It took a few more days to get there. Despite these difficulties, Andrée wrote in his diary, "Morale remains strong. With such comrades we managed to cope with all difficulties." On October 5th, the men landed on the island. But the next day they were caught in a snowstorm that lasted for several days. Later, Andrée wrote his last entry in the diary. October 8th. At last I shall be able to sleep here, as it felt like floating earth, like a rock surrounded by floes of ice, where we constantly hear the crunching and rubbing. We shall have to collect driftwood and whale bones, and only when the weather permits we have to move a little. The 3 men died soon after this,